All right, Sabrina, I'm so excited to see you. Thank you so much for coming on today. This is Sabrina Suarez. Sabrina is writing an incredible book. She's been writing it for ages. It's now swelled to how many words are we at? Like
Close to 100,000.
close to 100,000 words, which is
Yeah.
huge for a book, just for the record. But Sabrina brought me an incredible book idea that she'd been working on for a little bit. And well, let's tell them a little bit. What is the book about, and what did you title it?
So the book is called You'll Never Be Ready for War, and it follows a nomad who essentially gets drafted by her government into a military force that is supposed to defend and protect her home. But in that process, she realizes it might not be what it's made out to be, and she has to learn to not only trust herself and some gifts that she has come to fruition in the process, but also her fellow participants as well, who have, you know, really like brought forward a new version of her and hopefully survive this thing called war.
Yeah, absolutely. And you'll never be ready for war. It started out originally, you wanted it to be like a young adult fiction novel, right? That's where we started
Mhm,
from. You were like,
mhm,
it's gonna be
mhm.
young adult fiction. Now it's more like bordering on
It's
adult
like
fiction.
it's like new adult now. And it's so funny because I wanted young adult because I wanted this to be something that like resonated with a younger version of me.
Yeah.
And I realized through the process of writing it that I'm like, I am writing it from this current present moment version of me. And this present moment version of me loves like really graphic stuff. And so I was like, you know what? Instead of teetering on the edge of doing it, I'm gonna just like fully embrace that this is where it wants to go. And I just like trusted the process and it let me know we're gonna make it
Yeah.
adult now. And
I love it. And that happens often, right? So like you knew for a fact it was going to be a fiction book. You had a title when you came to me. You were like, this is the title. This is a non-negotiable. Tell us how you came up with that title.
so it's actually based on something my grandma used to say and still does say to this day. Whenever I was younger and like I would go to her and be like, I'm bored, grandma. You know, you dropped off at your grandma's house. There's not much to do
Hmm.
except watch TV. She would be like, "Oh my God, you're never going to be ready for the war. Let me hand you a broom. Let me hand you a bucket. Like, I need to keep your hands busy, kind of thing." That's how she grew up. It was always like chores, chores, chores. And she always says, anytime I say something like semi kind of like uppity or prissy or like, "Oh my God, I don't want to do that." She's like, "Ay, you're never going to be ready for the war," in the most like Hispanic little sassy woman voice. And so
Love
that's
that.
why.
I love it. I also love that it was inspired by your family, and this is a book that's all about family. And
Mhm,
there are so many characters in your book, first of all. If you're
mhm,
gonna, this is definitely not a one-off book. Sabrina has a
mhm.
whole series of books planned for this. And I know myself and any of your ARC readers have always been like, you need to hurry up and write the second book because they need to know what happens. Because it
Yeah,
leaves
yeah.
on a great cliffhanger, right? Like you left it on
Mhm.
this incredible cliffhanger and it's so ready to go. So let's talk about the writing process. First of all, how the heck did you and I end up together? Do you
I
remember?
think I saw something of yours on Facebook.
Yeah.
I can't remember what post it was, but I saw one of your posts and I was like, okay, I have been working on this idea for probably 3 years on and off, and I'm tired of saying like I'm working on this and not actually having something be complete.
Yeah.
And so I saw your post and I was like, I'm ready. I just need to get some support and accountability because I do so much better with accountability. Someone being like, all right, I'm going to check in every Tuesday. What are we
Yeah.
doing?
And that was the process, right? So
Mhm.
you signed on and we did like 3 months of coaching together to get your book ready. And I mean, the process is pretty simple for those who don't know. It's that you have homework in between sessions, but we have a session every single week to kind of check on. So it's part accountability, part developmental editing, and kind of asking the questions. And with you, I mean, you have a whole galaxy and universe of characters and
Yeah.
people to keep track of. So a lot of times my questions would come out of the blue, like, hey, so who's this character that you
Yeah.
just randomly dropped into the story? Right? But you are really building a world, which is different for people who, some people come to me and they're just writing business books. We're not world building in a business book other than giving you a perspective. you built an entire new framework, an entire new world.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, it's so interesting that you say that because I spent obviously years working on this in little ways. Like, oh, I would write, one scene and then store it away for a little bit, write another one,
Yeah.
squirrel that one away. And for me, it was like I was building relationship with these people for a while. And then you would come in and read some of the scenes and you're like, where did these people come from? Like, who are they? And I'm like, oh yeah, they're these people. But what you really helped me do is like understand, okay, just because I know who this person is, the reader doesn't, and I'm writing for the reader. So you helped me really like fill in the gaps that I didn't see because I was so in it for so long.
And one of the things that you and I got really clear on and that I thought was really cool was both of us had come out of NLP training.
Mm-hmm.
And we both had this like emotional intelligence component that your book was digging into, but I don't think you even realized how intentional, because it was so
Mm-hmm.
unintentional at first. And once we realized it and kind of brought it forward, your book, I feel like, got even stronger because it really talked to a young adult or a new adult generation about emotional intelligence and how that can really kind of support them in their lives. So it's like fiction book with real life lessons that they can take forward. That's pretty
Yeah, 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 yeah. And that's what I love about fiction. And I feel like I have consistently had that experience for myself where I have read something and digested it so much better and absorbed the lesson so much better because it's through storytelling. And so
cool.
that was really my intention going in. I mean, I just kind of talk like that sometimes, so I'm sure it just like seeped in organically, but it was really like I want whoever reads this to absorb the lessons in a very digestible way
Yeah.
because I find that it just like when you're storytelling, it really goes beyond any like race, class, like anything. Like anybody could relate to characters in a random world that's made up and like understand their sadness and what that feels like, or they could resonate with the resistance and what they would feel like being oppressed. Like there's just so much to be gained. And I really, really, really love that element of it. And so I'm glad that that came across in the writing.
It absolutely did. And, I loved working with you because you were so passionate. And every time, like, you were the ideal book coaching client, right? I would be like, Sabrina, you've got like a week and I need like 2 chapters. And, let's talk about the chapters before you start writing it. Tell me what's going to happen. And you really followed the storytelling framework. You went with,
Mm,
when we talked about hero's journey and heroine's journey, you brought it all in all of those beautiful components. And I just kind of got to guide the process and really kind of be the reader and follow along and kind of go, okay, well, you missed the mark. You jump from
mm,
A to Z, and I missed like all the letters in between. Let's figure it out. And
mm,
so because you were character building, you were like completely coachable.
mm, mm.
How is it, or like any tips for people that are considering a book coach on how to be coachable? I don't even know if you realize you were so coachable, but
Yeah.
do you have any tips on how to remain coachable when you're working with
Yeah,
a
yeah,
book?
yeah. So, I we have talked about this at length, but I am someone who really loves the like accountability element of things, and I was more concerned about having a good book rather than protecting my own ego or being stuck on like this needs to be a certain way. So I think for anybody going into this process, having that kind of open mind where it's like, yes, it's your story, and thus you are going to be immersed in every element of it, but understanding that like it might not have the impact that you want if you don't in some way cater it also to the reader.
Mhm.
And the only way you're going to get that perspective is if you open yourself up to being coachable or to receiving different perspective. And so throughout the process, whether it be with you as the book coach or the editor or the beta readers, like it was funny. They're all like, "Is this okay? Like, I'm sorry if this is like too, too much." And I'm like, I want to have a good book more than I want to cater to my ego. So tell me what it is that I need to know to make it a good book. Like that's what I care about more so. And yeah, I mean, every step of the process, I've just been like, tell me, I want to know. I want to know.
You were, yeah, and you were so like you were very like forthcoming. Like if I was like, no, it's really good, you're like, give me more. Like what's good about
Mhm,
it? Tell me what's working. And I love that, you know, it's not often that people want to dive into like what's working. We often get so focused on what's not working in our
Mm,
writing. And you were really keen when I was like, oh no, this chapter is actually really working. Then you and I would deep dive on our call about why it worked so that you
yeah,
could
yeah.
replicate it. And so what I was seeing from a book coaching perspective was your chapters getting stronger and stronger as you were
Hmm.
learning new tools. And towards the end, you actually ended up going back to some of your very first chapters and rewriting them
Yeah.
with everything that you learned. Do you feel like, you know, going through I mean, obviously during the process you learned some stuff. Do you feel like your chapters now are stronger because of everything that you learned? Silly question, of course.
Yes, so much, so much. I mean, I've been on this journey now for almost a year of
Yeah.
like from this, like you and I working together to me finishing the first draft to going through editing and all that kind of stuff. And I'm doing my like final read throughs now, and it's a completely different book because of the amount of stuff that I've learned from the start until now that I've gone back through. And you're right, like applied, and there's holes and things that I didn't even notice or see before. Or even like as I'm just thinking about the book, I'm like, oh wait, did I like tie that up nicely enough?
Mhm.
Does that make sense? Like I'm just thinking about it in a whole new way, and it's a much better book because of it.
Fiction is a beast, right? Like
Mm.
fiction is a whole other beast. Like in writing a nonfiction, it's very clear cut. Like we need to do this, this, this. But when you
Mhm.
introduce nonfiction, especially when you're creating your own world, we have a lot more creative energy that we can apply to it because things don't have to work the same in a fictional world as they do in a non-fictional world. So
Yeah.
it was a beautiful experience, super fun book. I can't wait for you to get it out. And you know, we worked together for about 3 months on it. Of course, we
Mhm.
got your manuscript complete, and then you decided to continue developing it, which we talked about when we finished. It was like, you know, there's still some more developmental pieces you could work on. You could add this, you could add that. Definitely take it to beta readers and start getting more feedback from your direct audience. And I
Mhm.
love that you've incorporated that and done that. So yes, your process has taken longer than other people's work. The manuscript was still complete when we were done.
Yeah,
Um,
which took me 3 years and I still had not done it. Like, I
3
had
years
been
down
working
to
on it for
3 months.
3 years. Yeah, and I got from chapter, prologue to epilogue within 3 months, which
Yeah.
was a ginormous accomplishment after having
Yeah.
gone that long without having gotten
I
that done.
like I was so proud of you when you finished it
Thank
because
you.
you really undertook like a ginormous project. And I remember, I don't know whether you remember this, but I went back and I looked at one of our first calls and it was like, Sabrina, are you sure? Like this is a
Yeah.
huge undertaking for 3 months. Like I love you and you're gonna give up a lot of your free time to do it. Nonfiction books take less time in a lot of ways because
Mhm.
again, start to finish, do. Fiction book, however, this is when like, you know, J.R.R. Tolkien did not write The Hobbit in 3 months,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Like it's world building, it's creationism. And so you knew what you were up for. You stood the task. And like I said, you were incredibly coachable. The book is now getting close to being ready to publish. I think you're
Mhm,
you're pretty
mhm.
close. Do you have an
Yeah.
idea of date? When are you thinking of publishing?
I'm really, really, really hoping by the end of summer. And
Yeah,
again, I'm like on the final read through stages where I'm just like
love it.
sitting with it. It's now gone through multiple rounds of editing, multiple people have read it, and I've gotten really good feedback. And I'm just like, all right, I want to personally sit with this and digest it and be like, okay, did I feel like I did everything justice? Um, yeah, so final stages, then I will start putting everything out there for it, marketing it, all that kind of juicy stuff. But
I'm gonna guess fall. I think you're gonna go for a fall
yeah,
publish. I think
yeah,
you're I,
I can
I
see
think you're
that.
pretty strong on a fall publish. It's April now. I can see a strong fall publish. I mean, you literally went from doing it on your own for 3 years to
Hmm.
coaching in a manuscript in 3 months to beta readers and readjusting it and sitting with the character and the worlds to see if they develop. And I love
Yeah,
that. I think that's an incredible way to do it. For people who are keen to get their book out in 3 months, yeah, Sabrina could have finished her book in 3 months and could have taken it and gone through an editor and just published. That's
yeah.
always a possibility. But
Mhm.
for Sabrina, because you had been thinking about this book for so long, it
Yeah.
wasn't the right choice for you to press print right away. You
Hmm.
really needed to
Hmm.
sit and develop it. And I know that part of that development, and we talked about this at length, was you know, where it goes from here. Because it was a multi-book
Yeah.
series always in your head. Was it not?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and what I will say too is like I have definitely taken longer on it than I would have needed to. Like I really could have hit publish like a few months after we completed, but I chose to take more time because I wanted to sit with it longer. And also I have obviously other obligations that I've done, and one of my businesses that I have is digital marketing, and so I wanted to make sure that I had a full like plan in place beforehand before launching. So all of these other factors, but like it, I mean, through coaching, it really helped me actually get to that place where I could even think of that as a possibility versus where I was, which was like for 3 years saying like I'm writing this book and had very little to show for it.
Well, and you and I had some great, like, because even though you're a digital marketer, you and I had some great conversations as well about like, how do you actually launch a book? Because it's a whole
Yeah.
separate ballgame from what
Hmm.
you do. And one of the discussions we had was with a book like this, that there could be a much longer lead time to build your audience and build your community around it. So when you launch, they're excited for your book and
Yeah.
they're chomping on the bit for the next one. So you
Hmm.
know, everything that you did, I think, made a lot of sense for your book. And that was part of the strategy that we discussed when we first started working together and where you've kind of continued from then on. I'm excited to see this book out in print. I know that anybody that's watching this is going to be excited to see this book in print. You'll never be ready for war. I'm calling it. I think it's going to be out this fall. I think it's going to be fall. I'm so certain of it. So I'm going to call it and say you'll never be ready for war out this fall from Sabrina Suarez. Thank you so much for joining me. Thank you so much for being an incredible coachable client,
Thank
my favorite
you.
kind. And I can't wait to work on it with you on book 2.
Thank you. Thank you so much for everything, really.
Oh, my pleasure. It was so good to work with you. And I can't wait to hear what other people think when they get to read this book. It's that
Yeah,
good.
same.
Thank you.